Hello Internet, this is Starcat. I've never done a video like this before, but I've seen enough of them to know that long intros are boring, so here it goes. Ursula K LeGuin is a remarkably underappreciated feminist fiction writer and anthropologist. Her ideas have informed fundamental concepts of the Aragon, Game of Thrones, Enderverse, and Harry Potter books, and without her it is hard to imagine any of those universes existing at all. She's been writing amazing books since the 1960s and is most well known for her wonderful Earthsea fantasy series, but she also did a series of sci-fi books and short stories called the Heinish or Ecumenical Cycle. LeGuin herself doesn't consider these stories to form a cohesive series, since there are inconsistencies between them which I'll be pointing out and giving my rationale for, while spoiling as little as possible. I think that these stories describe a fascinating and reconcilable universe that is worth exploring. Here is its history. The human race in the Heinish Cycle begins in the distant past on a planet called Hain, or Davenant. Humans evolved there, developed a high-tech civilization, and eventually created nearly as fast as light, or naval, ships. With these ships, the Hainish colonized a large part of the galaxy in a period called the Expansion. Little is known about this period, but it seems that Hainish civilization and culture at this time was a lot like the civilization of our Earth now, driven by desire for power and conquest. During this time, all of the planets visited in these stories, including our Earth, Terra, were colonized and populated by Hainish humans. Genetic and social engineering took place in many Hainish colonies, which accounts for some of the more radical differences between humans encountered in future stories. After many hundreds of planets were colonized, the Hainish civilization collapsed. Naval technology was lost and forgotten, and every Hainish colony devolved to the point where they no longer remembered their common ancestry. In this period of no contact among human planets, the entire history of our Terra takes place. Then, sometime in the next 300 years, there is an ecological disaster on Terra, which greatly reduces the human population and allows life to persist only by strict rationing and government control of resources. Around this time, civilization on Hain recovers, and naval technology is rediscovered. The Hainish use their records from the expansion to return to nearby planets and lay the groundwork for a League of All Worlds. Around the year 2300 is when the book The Dispossessed takes place. Its planet of Eurus is, along with Hain and Terra, the high-tech backbone of the newly formed community of human worlds, currently 9 planets. At this point, Hain is wise and peaceful, Terra is recovering from its ecological failure, in part because of the charity of the Hainish, and Eurus is high-tech and stable, but with an extremely unequal society. Without spoiling the plot of The Dispossessed, which is my favorite of the Hainish books, its events lead to the invention of a device called the Ansible, which allows for instantaneous communication among planets and spaceships. Eurus' sister planet of Anarus, which has an equal society and genius scientists, but is isolationist and unambitious, is also incorporated into the human galaxy because of the events of the Dispossessed, and Anaresti feature prominently among the Terrans and Hainish in future stories. Eurus and Anarus remain strictly separate, but are referred to together as Setchians by the other human worlds. The novella, The Word for World is Forest, takes place 50 years after the Dispossessed, and shows the Ansible being distributed among human worlds, bringing them together and unifying them in ways that the Hainish expansion never was. The Ansible has allowed the human worlds to form a super-government called the League of All Worlds, which will send envoys to new human planets as they are discovered and incorporate them into the League. The Word for World is Forest places League Year 1 18 years before the events of the novella, and shows how Terra is still unable to support itself without resources harvested or gifted from other planets. The next story is called Rokanan's World, and takes place many centuries after the previous 2 books, in 2678 CE or League Year 334. In the intervening years, deep space sensors of the League have detected an incoming invasion force from a distant part of the galaxy, and the League is rushing to contact nearby planets, creating alliances and collecting taxes to fight in the war to come. Meanwhile, a human world called Faraday has revolted against the League and begun a campaign of conquest on nearby planets using League technologies. One new technology is massive bombs that are delivered nearly instantaneously by unmanned faster-than-light FTL ships, which the Faraday soldiers hide on the little-known planet of low-tech humans where Rokanan's World takes place. By the end of the book, the Faraday weapons are destroyed and their revolt stopped, while the hero of the story discovers a latent telepathic ability called mind speech that is taught to the other humans of the League. FTL ships and weapons are only rarely mentioned in future books, and they are only built again in the very remote future. Rokanan's World was the first book that LeGuin ever wrote in the Hainish universe, and she has said that she regrets including FTL technology in it. It makes sense, though, that the League would intentionally suppress FTL technology after the war with Faraday, and eventually forget their construction altogether. Books set in the far future show that the powerful human worlds are not afraid to demand that certain types of weapons not be used. In fact, it is the only sort of control that the human civilization is not shy about exerting on the humans that they encounter on new planets. FTL weapons can be explained as an early example of a devastating technology purposefully abandoned in the wake of the war with Faraday. Planet of Exile takes place long after Rokanon's world in 3755 CE, League year 1405. Since Rokanon, mind speech has become well known throughout the League, although it is still rare to be a born natural at it. Planet of Exile takes place on a planet called Werrel, where Terran colonists arrive just 5 years before the alien invasion mentioned in Rokanon's world begins and shuts down communication with the League in 3175 CE, League year 825. Werrel is not invaded, but technologies like the Ansible and naval ships are lost, and the Terran population shrinks over the many years. By 3470 CE, League year 2020, the Terrans on Werrel, who have interbred with the native humans and are now called All-Terrans, rediscover naval travel and return to Terra to discover what has become of the League, which is the plot of City of Illusions. Outside of Werrel, the invading aliens called Shing have destroyed the League of All Worlds. The Shing are indistinguishable from humans and have the unique ability to lie in mindspeak, which allows them to infiltrate all of the worlds of the League and, over the course of many generations, intellectually sabotage the works of the League to make them lose coherence and eventually fall apart. The Shing do not take life directly under any circumstances, but allow humans to die and kill each other in the chaos that they cause. The Terra that the All-Terran ship arrives on has been under the influence of the Shing for so long that they have barely any shared knowledge or civilization left. There is no state system, high technology, or communication with any of the other human worlds. And the Shing that rule Terra use their agents to block any human achievement and to keep the human tribes fighting one another. However, the All-Terrans have developed a unique and highly sophisticated discipline of mindspeak that is based on empathy, and that allows them to detect the Shing's lies and escape from their influence. The surviving All-Terrans return to Werrel at the end of City of Illusions to warn the other All-Terrans about the fate of Terra and the League. It is implied that after these events, the All-Terrans build more ships and use them to liberate the human worlds from the Shing by 4670 CE, League year 2320. The 1,495-year period between the Shing's arrival and their defeat is referred to in future books as the Age of the Enemy. By the time of the next book, The Left Hand of Darkness, the human worlds have reunified as the Ecumen, with the Hainish, Terrans, and Setians again at the center of human civilization. The ecumenical calendar that is established still uses Earth-length years, but ecumenical year 1 is associated with a Hainish cosmic milestone that took place early in the Age of the Enemy, so that while Left Hand of Darkness takes place in ecumenical year 1491, that's only 2 centuries after the defeat of the Shing. Stories that take place during the ecumenical period say that Terra in the Ecumen has experienced several more periods of devastation and violent revolution, showing that Terra is still in many ways culturally primitive, even though Terrans are still often important figures within the Ecumen. The Hainish are still shown to be peaceful, wise, and altruistic under the Ecumen, while Anaresti are still shown to be communal, stateless, and brilliant in science. The Ecumen is also the political successor to the League of All Worlds and has taken up all of its core beliefs and practices, and continues to expand and send ambassadors to new human worlds. The Left Hand of Darkness follows such an ambassador from Terra on a mission to Gethen, where the humans seated there by Hain in ancient times were engineered to be genderless and asexual for most of the year. This book also explains policies of the Ecumen that are mentioned as aspects of the League, such as cultural embargo, which is Star Trek's Prime Directive or Futurama's Brannigan's Law. In a later series of Hainish short stories that takes place around 5024 CE, ecumenical year 1645, Anaresti Science has developed ships capable of safely transporting humans instantaneously using Churton theory. This is the most advanced technology ever developed by human scientists in the Hainish universe, and has the capability to bring the whole human interplanetary community together without the quantum time leaps involved with naval travel. Churton theory encounters many difficulties, though, and humans that travel using it find it difficult to establish a shared objective reality upon arrival, a problem that human physicists call the chaos effect. Also, sometime between the Left Hand of Darkness and the Churton stories, mind speech is abandoned, forgotten, or has fallen out of favor and does not appear in any future books. LeGuin has implied that she just did not believe in mind speech anymore and did not want to include it in new stories, but it could make canonical sense as an ability that has been sophisticated and internalized into a passive exercise rather than an active mode of communication. The way that humans that Churton attempt to overcome the chaos effect is by a process called entrainment, wherein the crew of a Churton ship tries to achieve harmonious thought with one another by which reality can be agreed upon and understood. The empathetic link of entrainment that liberates human crews from the chaos of the Churton experience may be the legacy of the All-Terran mind speech that once liberated the people of the League from the chaos of the Shing. The stories that feature churning technology talk about it being custom for naval crews to spend a period of time bonding before voyages to develop an empathetic web of trust among one another so that their voyages run smoothly. I think that even though mind speech is used irregularly after the events of Left Hand of Darkness as a tool of communication, the idea of empathy being a necessary aspect of space travel is preserved in entrainment. LeGuin says in her commentary on these stories that she believes that the engineers of the Ecumen will continue to try to perfect instantaneous spaceflight in the future. But since the characters in Four Ways to Forgiveness, which takes place around 438 years later, still travel on naval ships, it can be assumed that they have not succeeded. It could be that cargo ships that do not have human crews mostly travel via churning by this time, since it was only when human passengers were involved that churning became problematic, but no specific mention is made of such ships in future stories. Four Ways to Forgiveness also shows that cultural embargo has been relaxed to demand that extinction-level weaponry be abandoned before full inclusion in the Ecumen is allowed. And in describing the settlement of the planet of Four Ways to Forgiveness, which is called Werrell but is not the Planet of Exile, which is now called Altera, the history of Hainish civilization is given a figure of 3 million years. There are many other short stories set in the Hainish universe which enrich its history, but most take place on the planets of these main stories, or are reliant on their frameworks. All of the dates I have used are taken from the books and from extrapolation with the help of several scholarly articles, which I will link in the description. All of the books are of course the property of Ursula K LeGuin. She's still alive, just old as shit, but is still a fiery, witty feminist, and if you have a moment, you should certainly watch interviews with her, and of course read her books. Thanks for watching.